Howard Beck joins the show to help us sort through the latest developments of the Damian Lillard saga. What's next for Lillard in the Heat? How does the league value Tyler Herro? And what happens if the trade for Lillard falls apart? We answer that and more on today's edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, here as always, David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Fun show for you today. We're joined by Howard Beck to help us talk about the latest with Damian Lillard and the most interesting parts of what has become a very public negotiation. We'll talk about third teams that could be involved for Tyler Herro. What happens if Miami, for some reason, does not land Damian Lillard? So Howard, thanks for coming on. Let's just jump right into this. Do you still think Damian Lillard ends up in Miami?
The still is the problem there, because I'm not sure if I ever assumed anything. I assume nothing at this stage of my life and career covering this crazy league. I do think that there's a likelihood, a higher probability. I don't think it's a lock. I've never thought it was a lock. And it's interesting, within the last week, I've had conversations with a couple people around the league, and two in particular on one day that were interesting because of how polar opposite they were. One told me, listen, stop trying to figure this thing out. He's going to Miami. It's a done deal. I mean, he didn't say done deal, but he basically just said, like, this is what's going to happen. Trust me on this. Okay. That was a executive with one Western Conference team. Somebody in a different Western Conference team's front office then said, pump the brakes a little bit. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of factors involved. Don't assume anything. And that tends to be how I usually am with this anyway, but I always pay attention when somebody I know well in the league says they believe so strongly that something's going to happen. As I always caution people, not that the stupid aggregators ever get the caveats and context into any of their stupid tweets. But when someone says this thing is going to happen, it's a certainty. Like, the gossip, the grapevine in this league is very, very active. And the grapevine often has a good beat on where things are going, but the grapevine isn't always correct. And so even when there's a consensus opinion sometimes, there was a strong consensus 4 years ago that Kevin Durant was going to end up with the Knicks. Everybody seemed to believe that, especially after they salary dumped all those guys in the Porzingis deal. Everybody thought they know it. They're only doing this because they know. They know. And the grapevine was wrong because Kevin Durant threw everybody a curve that year. So, and this is not free agency. I don't know why we keep losing track of this. We'll get into it, I'm sure. This is not free agency. Damian Lillard has 4 years left on his contract. He does not have a no-trade clause. He cannot block anything. Yes, there are other considerations. We'll get into it. But Damian Lillard is not fully in charge of this process. And he's not a free agent.
The notion of the grapevine is really interesting, and I kind of want to follow up on that because you mentioned the Kevin Durant example is a great one. Everybody thought he was going to the Knicks, does not go to the Knicks, goes to Brooklyn. But at the same time, everybody thought, the grapevine thought that Kawhi was going to the Clippers, and the grapevine was right. The grapevine thought LeBron was just bound for the Lakers that last year in Cleveland, and the grapevine. So, like you said, it's right and wrong. But where this stuff comes from, it sometimes feels like it's a game of telephone, where one executive says, "Yeah, he's going to Miami," because he heard from somebody else that it's a done deal. Dame's going to Miami because that person heard from somebody else, and it kind of goes on, and it just sort of ends up becoming a thing that keeps getting said. Without, I don't know, anybody, to your point, you can't really know for sure. There's no way to know for sure until something ultimately does or doesn't happen. So, when you hear this stuff, like, how cynical do you try to be? Like, I'm asking you as just a longtime NBA reporter, like when you're going about this kind of thing, you do tend to, it sounds like you already have a tad bit of cynicism when you're thinking about this stuff anyway.
I do. And, sometimes it just depends on what the situation is and who it's coming from, whether they're piped in for a specific reason. And, sometimes a lot of this stuff is speculative. Now, everybody that's in a front office, everybody that's on a coaching staff, various others around the league, scouts, obviously the agents, everybody's talking to each other, and they've got friends on other staffs. And so a lot of times what's happening is, somebody within one front office is telling their buddy in another front office, "Oh yeah, man, we're already planning for this. This is, that's how you know. That's how you know even before free agency starts where guys are going sometimes, right? Also because everybody's tampering all the time. And so I'm while we're talking, I'm scrolling back through because I wanted to see the one person who was so positive that it's going to be Miami. And yeah, no, he didn't really elaborate. I was trying to find whether there was a one silver bullet reason, but there was not really in that chain. So, sometimes it's what they've heard, sometimes it's what they know, and sometimes it's what they feel, just like the rest of us. So let's get away from the grapevine for a minute here, because it can be fallible. I think we should focus on the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are Damian Lillard has a clear desire, but Damian Lillard is not in charge of this equation. Right. And so the calculus of this becomes, how important is it to send Damian Lillard where he wants to go? How important is that to the Portland Trailblazers? And I'm not going to cast aspersions on anything that's out there or anybody who's reporting anything, but the Trailblazers absolutely can make whatever deal they want to make and should make the best deal in their own best interests, as much or more so than in Damian Lillard's best interests. Is there an optics element to this? Yes. Is there a political side of this? Are there reputations and egos and images and the weight of a franchise, not just star, but a legend, maybe the most important Trailblazer ever? Are all of these things stuff that you gotta kind of weigh or at least not ignore? Sure. But you don't make the deal based solely on that. You don't send Damian Lillard to Miami for a package of players and picks that is not worthy of him if you think it hurts your franchise, if you think it's not enough. You don't do it just because he wants it. That's insane. Joe Cronin and his staff should be fired if they made a bad deal just because they want to keep Damian Lillard happy and send him with a nice parting gift. Like, that's not really how the league works.
Right.
And real quick, Kawhi Leonard traded to Toronto, didn't want to go to Toronto. Jimmy Butler didn't choose Minnesota, didn't choose Philadelphia. Kyrie Irving made a trade demand, ended up in Boston, didn't put Boston on his list. Paul George wanted to go to LA once upon a time. Indiana sent him to Oklahoma City. Chris Paul did not choose Oklahoma City either. Carmelo Anthony did not choose Oklahoma City. I'm sorry, Oklahoma City, that I feel like I'm picking on you, but as I was trying to compile a quick hit list of players who wanted out but ended up somewhere other than where they wanted to go, it just so happens that it's often been Oklahoma. Chris Paul, for that matter, didn't even choose the Clippers the first time. He was trying to get to the Lakers, and as we know, David Stern, acting as the steward of the New Orleans franchise, ended up negating the trade, and he ended up with the Clippers.
Couple things.
Point being, it doesn't matter how big a star you are or what you want, okay? Like, the team will make the trade they feel is best for them. And if Lillard does end up with Miami, it will be after they have configured a deal with enough teams involved to get them the requisite return. That's the logical outcome here, folks.
So first thing, just for the sake of our listeners and even for the sake of other fan bases, because I think there's still
fan base.
There's still some vagueness apparently and some refuting of the reporting that all seems to indicate that does Dame Lillard in fact have Miami as his only preference as far as a trade is concerned? Because I don't know if you have reporting on that necessarily, but I think some people still say, oh, he only said Miami on a podcast weeks ago, and that there's no actual link or indication that he just wants to play in Miami. And I think a lot of Celtics fans and Sixers fans and other fan bases that might get involved in a trade still wonder whether or not Lillard prefers Miami above other destinations. Do you have a clear answer regarding that?
No, other than to say that there's a reason why Miami keeps being said.
Fair enough. And then my counter to your point about the other trades and everything else like that, and I totally understand why from Cronin and Portland's perspective it's to make the best trade, but almost all those trades, in fact, I think every one of those trades that you listed was about jettisoning that player and trying to get whatever you can back from them. It wasn't a goodwill deal or anything like that. It was, Kawhi burned bridges in San Antonio, Chris Paul burned bridges elsewhere, etc. They weren't trying to do these players a favor. Isn't there the possibility that Portland sees Lillard as their franchise's best player and says, you know what? I mean, we've gone everything we could out of Damian. He's done everything he could. We didn't hold up our end of the bargain in terms of building a functional team around him that could compete for even a playoff berth consistently. That while we know we're not going to take the best deal, and I don't think there's any deal out there that's going to be the requisite or commensurate value of a player of Lillard's worth, that we could still do him the favor of trading him to Miami to, again, make good on something that he wants as our franchise's best player.
It is true that Damian Lillard holds a place in Portland and with that franchise that none of the other players I mentioned held with the teams that they were forcing trades from.
Right.
But whatever the weight is of that being Damian Lillard's importance to Trailblazers lore, Trailblazers history, the city of Portland, everything.
Yeah.
You still have to make the best deal. It comes back to it every single time. You have to make the best deal you can. And if the Miami Heat had the actual trade package that was worthwhile, they would have made this days ago, right? There's nobody on earth. I don't think even the most deluded Miami Heat fans could make the claim that Tyler Herro plus Duncan Robinson or Kyle Lowry and some distant first-round picks and the rookie, the last year's rookie. I'm sorry, none of that. No. Even at age 33, which he will be in 10 days, there's no way. There is no configured Miami Heat package that doesn't involve Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo, who of course will not be in it, that would be worthwhile for the Blazers to do. So it has to be, if he's going to end up in Miami, it has to be a 3, 4, 5, 17 team deal, whatever it's going to be. It's going to get complicated because it has to be, because it's not that simple. And because no matter what Damian Lillard's importance is, and no matter how concerned you are about doing right by Damian Lillard, your first mission is still to do right by the people who are running or who are paying your salary as the GM. You still, and by your fan base. Your first responsibility is to the Trailblazers, period. And that doesn't mean being cutthroat, and it doesn't mean sending Damian Lillard to Siberia. It just means they can't just do what's best for him without any consideration for what makes sense for the franchise. That's dumb.
And to your point, in terms of the simplicity of it, if the Heat had the offer that Portland wanted, then this deal would be done. And to the same point, if all the Trailblazers were interested in doing was doing right by Dame, then also this deal would have already been done.
Yeah.
Right. And
right.
so
you
people
mentioned need to use their heads. These things are kind of obvious.
And this thing is complicated for a lot of different reasons. And one of them is Tyler Herro's value. Obviously, he does not carry enough value for Portland for him to be the centerpiece of a trade. There's reports that they're trying to get a third, maybe fourth team involved in facilitating Damian Lillard to getting to Miami. That's what we're going to talk about next. How many teams could be lining up to try to get Tyler Herro? What might even be a discount at this point? What's Tyler Herro's value across the league, not just for Portland? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. But first, a message from our partners.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, sometimes life is difficult. I think there's no way around it. And the path forward isn't always clear. Sometimes you're stuck in a particular juncture in your life and you don't know exactly what to do next, whether it's terms of your profession or a relationship or something like that. And sometimes it just helps to find the right person to talk to. And that's where a therapist could come in. I know therapists has worked wonders for members of my own family, friends of mine that have looked to a therapist that have needed help at a particular point in their life. And I think if you're considering finding a therapist, and let me tell you, BetterHelp is the right option for you. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, completely online again. So it's a service that's provided for you. You find the therapist you're looking for and it works. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. You get a 10% off discount on your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, we're going to be back tomorrow with Matt Moore to discuss if Damian Lillard on the Heat should be considered a super team. That should be a fun conversation. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. I want to get back to
the answer is yes.
What's your okay? Yeah, all right. We'll just leave it there. What's your thoughts on Tyler Herro? Because it feels like his name is just it's kind of being batted around on by different fans, and I struggle to find his value is obviously very polarizing across fan bases and across the league, and I just struggle to find like a pinpoint, like this is his value. This is what kind of player he is. He gets compared to Jordan Poole, who was just basically salary dumped on the Wizards. But I think he's a better player than Jordan Poole is. I think he's an elite 3-point shooter. I think there's a lot of things about his game. I think it's also very unfortunate that he was injured for the entire NBA playoff run and the Heat made it to the NBA Finals. I don't think that helped his PR necessarily. So, Howard, just your thoughts on Tyler Herro in a vacuum. I understand why Portland wouldn't want him with the glut of guards that they already have, but his value across the league as the Heat try to find maybe a third team to take on Tyler Herro.
He obviously has value based on age, skill set, accomplishments, and continued upside. Right? Like I would be happy to have Tyler Herro on my team if I had a team. 4 years and $120 million left is a lot, even in a rising salary cap. It's funny because for a while everything was going to be like, don't worry about the numbers. The cap's going to keep going up, and these contracts will look great in a year or two. Yes, but in a quickly constraining system, I'm not sure actually how to gauge that anymore. Right? Like when people said that, we knew that the cap would keep going up, and we knew that there'd be a new TV rights deal on the horizon, which there is. That would make the cap go pretty high, and that would make, by a percentage, some of these deals would look better. At the time that we were having those discussions, we were not anticipating as constrained of a system as the NBA has now just launched into with this new CBA. So
right, with the apron and the second apron and all that kind of stuff.
So put that, factor that in somewhere, just put that to the side. So I do think that the contract matters, and the length of it, the length and the actual salaries matter. But I think Tyler Herro fits in a lot of places. I think a lot of teams could use and let's face it, like he's probably best as your third, fourth best guy, on a contender.
Sounds about right.
But plenty of places he could fit. Plenty of places would like to have Tyler Herro, or if they're a team that's earlier in their development, maybe they get him and he's at the time you get him, he's your second best guy, or maybe even he's your best guy, but he's a piece as you're building towards something. Like he's a really good, attractive player. But I was looking before we started recording and just trying to figure out where he makes the most sense. I don't think it's a real long list based on where teams are in their trajectory, or based on whether or not they actually would want to play facilitator. Like it's kind of a small list. So the more important thing here is who actually on a practical level can get in on this and be the ones to take on Tyler Herro while sending something of value to Portland in terms of younger players or picks or whatever, or a player that fits better.
I have a handful of teams that I was looking at in terms of being able to help facilitate this whole thing, but is there a team that just jumps off to you?
Well, the Nets, obviously, and they've been in this discussion from the beginning. It's funny because, like, I don't think, like, the Damian Lillard to Brooklyn scenario, right? Like, Lillard and Bridges are friends and all this. The idea of, like, Lillard, Bridges, Cam Johnson, Claxton, is that a contender? Like, I think they'd be really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it's close. I think it's close. It's close enough that if I were Sean Marks, I'd be really tempted to be the ones to say, screw facilitator. I'm just going to go get him myself. And, if the Heat are his number one, it seems like Brooklyn is a logical second place in terms of his preferences because of what he said on Brian Custer's podcast a couple of weeks back. So we have a little bit of a roadmap. But if not, then given that the Nets are in some sort of weird middle build where, like, they're not a complete teardown, even though they offloaded two superstars, but they've got Bridges and Cam Johnson, they've got Claxton, they've got some good players. Herro fits.
Yeah.
He fits. And the Nets fit the profile of the team you want as the third team because they've got all the draft capital that they can reroute to Portland that Miami does not have.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a degree of sense unless the Nets decided to say, screw it, we want Lillard ourselves. They're the obvious one. I only came up with 3 other teams that might make sense.
Okay.
And let's see if these match any of yours. I'll read off mine, then you didn't
let's do it.
Tell me. The Thunder.
I did not have them, but I like it. Okay.
The Magic. The Jazz.
So I didn't have any of those.
Fascinating.
That's very interesting.
All right. Who you got?
The Magic I like though. What like Magic would send back?
I don't know who the Magic send back.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, I did actually start getting. I started with just a base level of like where does he make sense? Where's a team that is in their own trajectory, and like they thought the Magic are a young team, definitely could use shooting around their emerging young stars.
Yep.
Shooting guard's been kind of a revolving door. Everything's been a revolving door there, but anyway, and he's at the right age. Like they could build with him. I haven't checked to see what Orlando's draft capital and everything else is.
Jalen's, I think they have all their own picks. They probably have some picks coming in. I think they have do they still have a Chicago pick, or was that the last one? I think that might have been the last one.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. I think that was the end of that one.
Like Jalen Suggs is a Pacific Northwest guy who hasn't really found a spot. He's again playing guard, but maybe you could talk like, do you throw in a Jonathan Isaac or a Wendell Carter? Is Portland high on any of those guys? Like that could be something interesting. I like Orlando for Tyler Herro. The Jazz, then you get into the whole Danny Ainge thing. But if I think that's a little overstated. I still think that like if he looks at Tyler Herro and is like, that's a player that we want, then he'll just go out and get him. He's not going to just be out here trying to screw over Pat Riley. I think that's a little bit overstated. So the Jazz I like, but my teams were the Nets. We already talked about them. If it's like Dinwiddie's expiring and a couple of picks, I think that's a steal for the Nets to get a good player like Tyler Herro, but whatever. The Spurs could use a guy in that backcourt.
Sure.
Could you move like a Keldon Johnson, who's a little bit more of a wing, basically flip him in the deal, just that goes back to Portland, just turn Keldon Johnson or turn Tyler Herro into Keldon Johnson. I don't know. Maybe Portland likes that a little bit better just because it's maybe more positional for them as a need. I don't know. Yeah. The Knicks, I know that they've been interested, like they've been sort of rumored to be like a Damian Lillard dark horse, but like why wouldn't the Knicks go out and get Tyler Herro? Just flip. I mean, he makes sense maybe as a guy that you could play next to Jalen Brunson. Can you make
he does, but it's also like the Knicks. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what the Knicks, what their plan is here. There's obviously something else they're working on here. There obviously is, right? They offloaded Obi Toppin for a couple of second rounders, and they are now short at power forward. Not they necessarily need a traditional like old school banger, but like somebody has to play behind Julius Randle. I'm not even sure that Randle is there long term, but whatever. But they have this glut at kind of like everywhere from point guard through small forward, right? Like all these guys, like Brunson, Grimes, Quickly, now DiVincenzo, Barrett. There's just a lot of bodies already. But if Herro's coming in, somebody's going out in that deal.
So I have it as RJ Barrett.
You have that like Barrett to Portland?
Just Barrett replaces Herro in the package.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. I mean, and Barrett certainly can play small forward for the Blazers while they roll out their 15th consecutive small backcourt. Yeah, I mean that there's a certain logic there. The thing is, like Barrett, even though I named all those guys as being kind of part of the Knicks glut there, Barrett's only really the only one. I mean, Hart can be 2-3, but Hart is kind of a shorter 3.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Barrett's got more size and just strength. I don't know. It might leave the Knicks a little bit too undersized at the wing.
It would be the Knicks being in love with Tyler Herro because he's had some big games against them. That would be the only reason why they would do it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
2 more. I actually kind of like this. The Milwaukee Bucks. They could use some half-court offense as a spark. A young guy with those veterans, I think makes a lot of sense. I think Tyler Herro playing off of like Giannis and Brook Lopez makes a lot of sense. They have great defenders to cover up from them, especially Holiday in the backcourt. Can you just kind of cobble together? Yeah, you need some youth. Can you just put together like Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, and a Marjon Beauchamp? And is that interesting to Portland? I don't know. I just think that if I'm Milwaukee, maybe I'm calling and trying to get in on it. And Tyler Herro, obviously from Milwaukee.
let me play Joe Cronin for a minute. I just want picks, guys. I want picks. I want the best picks I can get.
The Bucks have their future firsts. Maybe they could throw those in there.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I think that the Bucks might crash and burn and Giannis gets traded or something, then I might be but Milwaukee's already sent, I think New Orleans still holds, I don't know how many of their picks from the Drew Holiday deal. So this is why. So when I was looking at like Oklahoma's got picks,
right?
The Nets, like just a ridiculous amount. The Nets have a ridiculous amount, and a lot of them are, from Phoenix, where everybody expects in a couple of years Phoenix is going to crash and burn. Those picks will be worth a lot. I'm like, seriously, like, not glib at all. If I'm the Trailblazers, I'm not interested in players unless they're all under 24 and with all-star potential. I want picks. I could go get a Bobby Portis. I can go get a Pat Connaughton.
True. Yeah. The Bucks have they could do one future first rounder in like 2029 or 2030. That's what they have available. Again, I have no idea if that's enticing. Yeah, kind of meh. David, any of those pop off to you before we move on? Oh, I think you're either muted or your microphone's unplugged. All right. It's tough, Howard. I don't really know which one of these makes sense, but I think the Nets still make a lot of sense. Dinwiddie and picks. They got all the picks. Dinwiddie's expiring. I don't know. We'll see what happens here.
Is Dinwiddie's going to the? No, he's not going to the Heat. He ends up with Portland.
He would have to go to Portland probably, unless we get a fourth team involved. Howard, do you have any fourth teams on your list? I'm just kidding.
we have seen 4-team trades in this league before. Maybe we've even seen bigger than that. It's not going to surprise me if this requires a fourth or more. So,
all right. Well, what if the Damian Lillard trade doesn't happen? Can we still consider the Miami Heat's offseason a success? Because they've already made a few different moves. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, we're going to be back tomorrow with Matt Moore to discuss if Damian Lillard on the Heat would make them a super team and what the league-wide implications of something like that could be. So make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast. If Damian Lillard does not end up on the Miami Heat, and I guess it depends on where he does end up. If he ends up with a different Eastern Conference team and a rival, then I suppose it would change the calculus on what I'm about to ask you, Howard. But if the Heat don't land Lillard, can they still consider this offseason successful, considering that they added Thomas Bryant? They seem to like their pick in the first round with Jaime Jaquez Jr. They brought back Kevin Love. They did not overpay for Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. They got Josh Richardson in the minimum. And you look across the landscape of NBA media as we do, and the free agency grades tend to be pretty positive for Miami. What's been your thoughts on the offseason just in general?
I think you have to consider it a mixed bag at best. I mean, you lost 2 starters off a finals team, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can praise them for not overpaying. Cool. You still lost them.
Yeah.
It's great that I mean, I was going to like use the example of like the Nuggets losing their guys, but they couldn't even overpay them because they just, didn't have the means to anyway, based on the rules. But like all things considered, you would just rather have the guy, right? Especially when these are players that you discovered, developed, and had blossom. And, I think they let them walk. Let is a strong word, but I think that they were clear-eyed about where this summer was going, right? Mm-hmm. They have some level of confidence. Like, that's the tell to me. And maybe it's the tell to my friend who was in a different front office who was saying, as we talked about earlier, that he was so positive about Miami getting Lillard. It seems to me that there's a certain level of confidence that they're doing something, right? You're not letting 2 really important players, including the point guard, walk unless you think you've already got something else figured out. Maybe that's Lillard. Maybe it's the backup plan of James Harden, something. I don't know. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's that they're so damn confident that they can just get a Jaquez and they'll find another, a Vincent replacement. Like that's fine. This is what we do. We'll just go grab another couple of guys off the scrap heap and turn them into #Heat Culture guys. Well, we're fine. Maybe. But I gotta think, like, if they thought they had no great options this summer, they would have done more to retain those guys. That's just my gut. You had bird rights. It's not like it's like you were constrained in the way that Denver was with Bruce Brown.
I think that's the right read on it.
Yeah, and so That's fine that they're bringing back Josh Richardson and they got Thomas Bryant and people like Jaquez and like it's fine. Like it doesn't change the fact that you lost 2 key players off a finals team, and as of the moment that we're recording this, you don't have the guy that you're thinking is going to make up for all that.
Isn't that kind of overstating the fact that they were key players? Like when Strus was only starting because Tyler Herro was hurt in the first place, the guy that nobody around the league seems to want, he was actually starting over the guy that just got paid $60+ million from the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, I mean, that's something to consider. Like, everybody sees the 2 starters departing from the lineup, and it's like, oh, they lost their starting backcourt, et cetera. But those guys were only in there because they needed them, because the bodies that were there above them originally were either hurt.
And if they couldn't deliver enough, they wouldn't have been in the finals. You're in the finals with those guys for a reason, right? Like, not everybody who gets to the finals just because you're in the starting lineup means all of a sudden you're great. I'm just saying, listen, I come at this from a standpoint of chemistry matters so much. Like, we talk about it all the time, and yet I still think people don't understand how important it is enough. Sometimes you pull a single thread from a finals team or a championship team, and that single thread is all it takes for the thing to start to unravel, and you don't realize it until after the guy's gone. And I've seen this happen in various instances across the league. Or sometimes a team just has like a breakthrough season, even like they're a team that, they were a 30-win team, they bust through, they have their one like 48-win season, you think the whole future's ahead, and then like the one really key glue guy leaves, and nobody makes much of it because he was a guy playing for the mid-level exception. Like, chemistry matters. The fact that they were able to manufacture this strange, unexpected run with players that nobody paid much mind to at all until they got there means something. So it means, if it's going to mean as much as we all said it did on the way up, it has to mean something if they leave.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the key story there is they're anticipating bringing in Damian Lillard. That's why you don't go off and use your bird rights to retain. They had a number for Gabe Vincent. They offered him $8 million a year for 3 or 4 years. So they felt like they wanted to bring him back, but Andy Ellsberg and his team of capologists decided that, hey, this is what we can do. Maybe 3-4 years from now, it's the second apron in this. Like, for some reason, they offered $8 million for a reason, in other words. But they figured that they decided they couldn't go over that for various different reasons. And I think a lot of people are assuming that reason is because they expect to get Damian Lillard, whether or not that happens or not.
One other quick thought, by the way, this goes back to the first segment. Apologies for not squeezing this into my earlier rant. It's a mini rant within the rant. Damian Lillard, in case anybody needs clarification on this, Damian Lillard is not Ben Simmons. Point being, when we talk about Lillard's leverage to get where he wants to go, Damian Lillard's not going to hold out. Like, there are no holdouts in the NBA, or at least there weren't in my entire career until I saw Ben Simmons do it.
Right.
That was a extremely unique and bizarre situation that I don't think we're going to see replicated anytime soon. Damian Lillard loves the game. Damian Lillard may not want to be in, I don't want to start naming teams, but a bunch of different other cities that are not Miami. If he gets traded to one of those cities, trust me, he's going to show up. He's going to play, and he's going to play his butt off because he's a class act and a professional, and he's going to do what he has to do. I don't mean to suggest that the Blazers should just be cutthroat about this and just send him wherever without any regard for his feelings whatsoever. But I'm willing to bet that there's more than one team that he would be okay with. Maybe there's one that he wants to be with more than the others. But I think there are any number of places he could be sent that would give Portland the return they want, and Lillard is not going to sulk. He is also, by the way, again, under contract for 4 more years. This is not a situation where you have to worry, like with Kawhi Leonard, where they could flee after a year. So anyway, I meant to incorporate that into the earlier rant because I do think people are overstating the idea that this is somehow a fait accompli, and it's a fait accompli specifically because they have to do what Damian Lillard wants to do. It'd be nice, sure, but they don't have to do anything that doesn't benefit the Trailblazers. And so, again, I think there's a very good chance he still ends up in Miami, but it's going to involve all these other teams because it's the only way that the Trailblazers can satisfy the other mission, which is helping the Trailblazers.
I see your rant. I have one other mini rant that I want to check with. This idea that one of us said Siberia, like, send them off to Siberia or something. And it's kind of like half jokingly we talk
Poor
about
Siberia.
that.
Siberia gets a bad rap, probably.
And-
It might have great
And
skiing.
so, by
for
the
all I
way,
know.
when we talk about Siberia, we're
Frozen
sort of like
tundra.
everybody's sort of half, like everybody's sort of nodding at like Salt Lake City or Oklahoma City. I mean, we all know what the Siberians are.
I was not thinking Salt Lake.
None of these cities are Siberia. They're all great
Fine
American cities that are fun places
Sure,
to be. Howard,
yes.
you've been to all these cities. I've been to all these cities. Like all these cities, you'll be fine. You'll find the restaurants that you like. There's shopping malls. It's not Siberia.
They all have a cheesecake factory. Every single one of them has a cheesecake factory.
Nobody
It's
wants to
everywhere.
play in
Everywhere.
Portland, though. Nobody wants to play in Portland, though, right?
Portland
This
is
that whole
also
argument.
Siberia. Portland's a great town. There's not all 30 of these, well, whatever, 28 of these cities are great cities.
Joe Cronin should try to help Dame leave Siberia for warmer climates. I think that's what
Siberia.
Yes,
One Siberia to another. Howard, I have to ask, and I'm sorry that we're going long here, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you this as a longtime New Yorker, the way that you are. How many hot dogs have you had in your entire life? And I ask you this because Joey Chestnut just ate 62 hot dogs on the 4th of July. And I was trying to think about how many, like, is that more? Did he have in one sitting more hot dogs than I've eaten consumed in my whole life? I think it's right there. I've done the math on my end. I spent way too much time on it, if that's not obviously apparent. How many hot dogs have you had in your life? Do you think it's more than 62?
The hot dog eating contest, as far as I'm concerned, I know this might get me like banned from the rest of the country. It's an abomination. It's just
send Howard to Siberia.
It's
Howard to Siberia.
Absolutely disgusting. I've never watched it. I've like the highlight pops up on Twitter, so like I've seen how this goes, and I've watched just enough, like 3.2 seconds or whatever, to go like, this is absolutely gross.
Most of the hot dogs end up on the ground. It's just disgusting.
Why would you do this to yourself? It's just disgusting. I'm totally appalled and turned off by the whole thing.
Don't they have like some actual term that they use for like if you can't keep it down? I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it here, but it's like
I don't want to be talking about keeping hot dogs down.
I just think about like in Stand By Me, the pie eating contest, and that's where my head goes with this stuff. In the aftermath of that, to answer your question, Wes, it's been a very long time since I've had just like a hot dog. Like I will have, like, I'm not above having the occasional, like, the Polish sausage or something, or like, and I don't go to a lot of baseball games, but like I get like hot dogs at a baseball game somehow sounds right. It's contextual. Like once you're there, it feels like the right thing to do. But I've kind of, I at some point, because I am firmly in middle age, at some point in my earlier part of middle age, when I started realizing like, oh no, you can't just subsist off of like, burrito supremes every day of the week, which I was doing at some point in my 20s. Like at some point I decided I'd just probably actually watch what goes in my body and try to be semi-healthy. So I swore off hot dogs a long time ago. I don't eat them.
Do pigs in a blanket count?
No. I can't remember the last time I had one of those. That's an appetizer. That's like off of somebody's like bad appetizer plate. No, I don't. I'm not doing hot dogs. Haven't in a long time. This is not to say that I am like some fucking perfect, model of nutritious eating. I eat plenty of stupid bad stuff, but not hot dogs. They're
noted hot dog snub. Howard Beck joins us here.
Howard, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show, talking Damian Lillard and hot dogs with us. We do appreciate it. Hard-hitting journalism here. Is what we do on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, as a reminder, we will be back tomorrow with Matt Moore to discuss more on Damian Lillard and the latest on what he's hearing. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for joining us.